changes teams? Who wins the national championship? And much more. It's been quite a year in the world of women's basketball, and with less than 2 days of 2022 left, Alex Simon of Bay Area News Group and I are going to look ahead. What are our most bold predictions for the year ahead in women's basketball? The Locked On Women's Basketball podcast starts right now.
Ogunbowale for the win.
Good! You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Jackie Powell. I'm one of your Friday hosts this fall. And well, actually, it's now winter. I cover the New York Liberty at the Next. I help with the Next social media strategy. And I've covered women's basketball nationally at many different places. We want to thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And remember, Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by everyone at the Next, a place where we cover women's basketball all the time, and we tell the stories that need to be told every day. Also, if you subscribe to us, you can get 50% off our partner site, The Equalizer, which covers women's soccer every day. Also, Locked On Women's Basketball is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and many more. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, on today's show, we are going to make some bold predictions for 2023 in the order in which they appear. So, first, we're going to talk about free agency and the NCAA Tournament. Then, we're going to make some predictions for the draft and the beginning of the WNBA season. And then we'll end with our predictions for who is going to rule the 2023 WNBA season and win the WNBA championship. But Alex, hello.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm excited to get off some hot takes today.
Oh, yes. I mean, I messaged you and I was sort of like, what would be a good way to cap off the year without going into free agency completely? Because free agency is going to be a lot. So we're going to just get some conversations started. So we're going to begin with free agency, actually, because in the calendar year in 2023, the negotiations are going to begin, I believe, on January 21st. Which is a little bit later this year. So I'm going to punt over to you, Alex, first. So what is your one prediction or one bold prediction for free agency? I'm sure you have many.
Yeah, there's more than one, but if I have to pick one that feels the boldest in the sense that, this is the one that I'm going to go with is a former MVP being traded. The writing was on the wall that a split was going to happen between Kurt Miller, the Connecticut Sun, and Jonquel Jones for a while, it felt like. Obviously, Kurt's left, and he's now in sunny Los Angeles out on the Best Coast with me on the West Coast there. But I also wonder if JJ and the Sun could still split too. Our fearless leader at the Next, Howard Megdal, pointed this out over at the 9 in a Basketball Wednesday when the Sun hired Stephanie White as their head coach. General manager Jen Rosati was asked specifically by Howard about Jonquel, and Rosati's answer barely mentioned Jonquel specifically, even though the question directly asked about JJ. And it kind of makes me wonder if we just think the way that team has been built, if something's coming down the pipe there. I could see a JJ trade happening. And frankly, like that could be a really interesting way for Connecticut to rebuild its roster because so many of what the skills that they've had overlap. And if they think they want to keep Brianna Jones, which I don't know for sure if they do or not, somebody's got to go. And I just happen to think that it's JJ.
It's really interesting because I was talking to Isabel Rodriguez this morning about Alyssa Thomas, and she made a comment about how, Alyssa Thomas found a way to bring Bree Jones with her to the team they play for in EuroLeague. And I'm sort of just thinking, I'm like, well, I wonder what type of role Alyssa Thomas will play in the Suns' free agency plans. I mean, it seemed pretty clear to me during the same press conference that you mentioned that the Sun view Alyssa Thomas as their franchise linchpin rather than the player who won MVP in 2021.
Which I can't say I blame them for, by the way, but that's part of why if we think this thing wasn't working, even if you switch up the coach, maybe you make the trade to really shuffle the deck a little bit. So what is your bold prediction then, Jackie? I'm sure you have several, but what is your one?
My one is that Candace Parker is going to return to the Sparks.
Oh.
So I happen to believe that this feud between Kurt Miller and Candace is not the most real. I mean, I think these are two people who, if they have two of the same goals, which is to win, I think they can get along just fine. I think that was sort of a feud that was orchestrated for us, which, you know what? I mean, we need those types of storylines in the WNBA. But I think while Candace appreciated playing in front of the folks from her childhood, I just wonder how much more is she willing to do sort of the constant back and forth that her wife Anya and her new child Air and even Layla had to make. That seemed like a lot, going from coast to coast. And as we know, or maybe not coast to coast, but from the West Coast.
The coast of Lake Michigan is a coast.
Right. And she does spend a lot of time away from her family during the off season when she does those Turner-related commitments. And, at some point, I just wonder, will she be another player who won't have any patience for the lack of investment that the Chicago Sky franchise puts in its players? I'll never forget what Stephanie Dolson told SNY's Maria Marino after she signed with the Liberty. And she said, the entire franchise, you can just tell they really care about their players. They care about the level of basketball they put out on the floor, which we can produce the best when we're not really worried about the other stuff, like where we're going to practice, how we are traveling, what's the schedule, just all that other stuff. We can just focus on basketball. We can put out the best product. So to me, I just wonder, is playing in Chicago for another season, is that what is going to make Candace Parker and her family, not necessarily her extended family, but her nuclear family, feel most comfortable?
I do get the sense that perhaps Candace is not as likely to return to Chicago. I don't want to rule it out exclusively. I do want to offer one counter, though, because you mentioned she spends a lot of time away doing her Turner-related commitments. That usually takes her to Atlanta. And if she was maybe looking for kind of a final season swing, why not go see if the Dream are interested in having you kind of be their point forward and pair up with a really fascinating young superstar in Ryan Howard and maybe see what other moves the Dream are looking to make to try to make one big swing for a title in the South. We know she knows Atlanta well. So I agree that there might be some moves that happen for Candace. I don't know exactly where, but her offseason is going to be a fascinating one.
Wow. I love the Atlanta option, but the only thing that makes me think maybe not is just the language that's come out of Dan Padover and Tanisha Wright, and that they're saying we are in for the long haul. We are, they were extended to 5-year contracts. They want to build this slow and steady. Although at the same time, I mean, Dan Padover worked with Bill Lambier, and a lot of the work he did when he was with Bill involved getting pretty high profile free agents. So it could go both ways.
If a
But I
player who is willing to come can help that long haul become a very shorter trip, you
Mhm.
might as well at least be willing to explore it, if not do it. Is the way.
Oh, oh,
So
absolutely. Absolutely. Now, as we move from free agency in January and February, we now take a stop in March and April, which is the NCAA Tournament predictions. So I'm just going to come out and say what my prediction for the tournament is. I think Notre Dame is going to make it to the national championship game, and I think they're going to do it by beating defending champion South Carolina in the Final Four. But I also think that Notre Dame won't win the final because they're really young and their tournament experience is, or at least with this core group they've assembled, their tournament experience isn't, I guess, as lengthy or apparent as, let's say, Aaliyah Boston on South Carolina or even Haley Jones on Stanford. And the reason I really see this happening is, well, one, South Carolina, as of now, is at the same side of the bracket as Notre Dame is, according to Charlie Cream's latest bracketology. But also, what really impressed me about Notre Dame what has impressed me, has been how smart their ability to execute a scout has been. And I saw that in the game against UConn. Mind you, UConn had some folks injured, but I just can't get it out of my head watching the scout that Niele Ivey put together and then seeing how well her team executed it, which was leaving Aubrey Griffin open and challenging someone who isn't super confident in her shot to shoot it. And so I just think that there's potential for the Fighting Irish to come up with another very, how do I put it, smart scout for South Carolina, because I believe the Gamecocks have their flaws as well.
I, having watched South Carolina, they definitely are a team that has some things they will need to work out between now and April, let's even say, not even March, because I think they might as well breeze to the Final Four at this point. But there are certainly teams with the talent to at least scare them, if not beat them. I mean, I watched Stanford have a 10-point lead after 3 quarters against them in person. So there are teams. I would wonder how Notre Dame would be able to handle a dominant post presence, because I think that is their big question mark. Could they scheme it up? But I love Olivia Miles. I think she's an incredible player. It would not surprise me at all if Notre Dame kind of showed up a year earlier than most people thought in the national title game. If you don't mind me then kind of sidecarring your prediction there, Jackie, because I have a national champion prediction, and I actually think it'll be a Stanford who is maybe the key, a freshman who is the key for Stanford to win the national title. But it's not going to be last year's number 1 overall pick in that regard. Lauren Betts was the number 1 overall recruit in the country coming into Stanford, 6'7" out of Colorado. But she's kind of struggled to find a role on the farm so far this year. And actually, there's an article that dropped this week where Marissa Ngemi from the San Francisco Chronicle talked to Betts kind of about that. And Betts was expressing some obvious disappointment, but understanding what her role is. And I do wonder, this is a Stanford team that is deep at the post position. Cameron Brink is maybe, I think, the best player in the country. Yes, even ahead of Aaliyah Boston. She certainly outplayed Aaliyah in the game against each other.
Yes.
On top of that, there's several post players that are ahead of Betts in the rotation. Kiki Irioff and the two seniors, Ashton Prechtel and Fran Belibi. So Betts has really struggled to find a role, and some of those struggles might not even abide by next year. So our Michelle Smith just wrote on Thursday here today, wondering, like, could that be something that, like, we could see Betts maybe look to transfer after the year? I don't know. It's an interesting question, but they do have a freshman who's been vital for them so far this year, in Talana Lopolo, who's immediately stepped in and been the point guard that Tara Vanderveer desperately needed with this team. I mean, without Lopolo, Haley Jones would be running a lot more point, and there's still, ball handling shared between the two of them. But if it were all on Haley, I think the Stanford team would really struggle. And Talana has just immediately become an important and vital piece. And if that is the way she played in the South Carolina game, she didn't have a turnover, I believe, until like the end of the fourth quarter, and just has been a very composed player as a freshman. I think if Stanford's going to be a national title worthy team, and they are, if they're going to actually win it, I think it'll be Lopolo who makes the biggest difference for them this year, and not the number one overall recruit.
So let me ask you, though, is a player like Kiki Arioffen, I mean, do you think she's taken a really big jump that also has made it tough for Betts to come in?
There's an element of Betts' game right now where you can just tell that there's an athleticism lacking there. There's a lot of rigidity in the movement when you watch her go up and down the court. There's just, she's 6'7". You understand that some players are going to move a little slower, but I wonder just how long the ramp up will be. And Stanford's had this with other players too. I mean, Hannah Jump has become almost a 40-minute a night player for them at shoot guard, when there was times before where she couldn't stay on the floor for more than a couple of minutes at a time when she was a younger player, even as good of a shooter as she was. So I think there's a way for Betts to find a role. And I do think it's in part hard for her just because she went to one of the deepest teams of post players in the country to know for sure. Cameron Brink's starting to hit more 3-pointers, so there maybe is a way to play both Brink and Betts on the floor together. But the look for next season would have Betts being their third big behind Brink's senior season and Irioffen's junior season. And I would wonder if they could convince her to stick around and stick it out, if they can find a really good role for her next year. But that just might not be there this year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like Ashton Prechtel has bounced back after struggling so much last year. So it's like you have that depth that's improving, making it really hard for that freshman to break out. So we are going to take a little break and discuss something not related to women's basketball, but related to safety and health. And both matter so much. So I think Alex knows this about me. I'm a big fan of musicals and movie musicals, and I also enjoy the movie musical Remake. And this might be a very unpopular opinion, but I love the 2011 remake of Footloose with Julianne Hough and Huff and Kenny Wormald, who he's like a dancer that's much less famous than Kevin Bacon. But anyway, what does this have to do with health and safety? Well, the film opens with something quite tragic. It opens with a scene when a group of friends are having a few drinks and dancing to the famous song Footloose by Kenny Loggins. And then that group gets into the car to drive home. And what ensues moments later is a car crash that kills every person inside the vehicle. And what happens later is that the town administers a ban on dancing and loud music as a result of the trauma. But this is one of the risks of driving drunk. I doubt dancing and loud music will be banned in your town or city, but people die as a result of drunk driving. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. All right, now back to our program. Thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen today. Also, thank you for enduring my musical theater references. Now, for your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. The biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, we are moving ahead to events that occur in the months of April and May. So, okay, WNBA draft time. Alex, what is your one bold prediction?
All right, so in the draft, I think one of the lottery teams is going to make a trade for Skylar Diggins-Smith. Obviously, there's been what I would argue is a falling out that's happened in Phoenix between Diggins-Smith and that organization. And it's known via our fearless leader, Howard, that they were looking to trade her even in the middle of last season. Her status for next year is going to be a little iffy because of the fact that she's currently bearing child and will give birth at some point in the spring. How ready she might be to play in 2023, the last year of her current contract, is a bit of a mystery, but I would suspect the teams in the W know. And with how well she was playing before she was gone last year, somebody's got to make a move for her and try to have her be their difference maker. It's not going to be Indiana. I think they won't mess around. They'll just take Aaliyah at number 1 and say, thank you very much. But there's 2 lottery teams that intrigue me. Minnesota and Atlanta each have 2 first-round picks, and I think could both really use somebody who kind of runs the one and the point. Minnesota has the 2nd pick and Vegas's pick at 12, and I think pairing up Skylar and Napheesa Collier would be just an amazing combo to build around. Especially, you have the number 2 pick. I don't think you would need to trade the number 2 pick to get Skylar, given all of the questions there. So I think you could build quite the deal and quite the team around a core of Skylar, Napheesa, and whoever you take it to. Her Hoop Stats just did their mock offseason, and they traded the 12 and a few other picks and Natalie Achanwa, which would work out contract-wise. I don't know if that work out for Phoenix's roster, but I get why you would do it and just kind of make it work. So I could see Minnesota being a fit. I also, for Atlanta, they have picks 3 and 8, and I think Skylar showing up next to Ryan could just be an amazing combination of guards. Probably the best 2-way guard combo in the league the moment that they show up together in terms of what they both can do offensively and defensively. If you traded number 8, threw in Arie McDonald, who's a former U of A Arizona Wildcat, kind of can help sell the home crowd on the trade that way here to bring in a Wildcat. That could be a good starting spot. I also wonder, with that number 3 pick, if you're Atlanta, that Haley Jones could be somebody around there. She might go 2. But if she's available at 3, if Phoenix is really interested in Haley, especially, it's former Stanford player Vanessa Nygaard, the coach there, really likes what Tara and Haley have done at Stanford. I saw Vanessa, by the way, at the Stanford, South Carolina game. Could you maybe convince Phoenix to kind of throw in the 2024 first-round pick as well and be willing to sell next year's loaded draft class's future for the number 3 pick? Phoenix doesn't have a first rounder right now. So giving them 2 first rounders to build around plus Arie McDonald to give up Skylar in a next year first, I think that could be a fascinating trade to build.
Oh my God. Yes. Oh man. I do like the Arie McDonald part in the trade because I know how much she's so beloved in Arizona. I mean, she's working for her former coach at U of A in the off season. So to just allow her to be there all the time.
There are a lot of Wildcats up here in the Phoenix area, and it's, the worst 2-hour drive you'll ever make because it's just nothing between Phoenix and Tucson, but she's probably made it plenty times. So
see, my reaction to that is I'm not sure how SDS would fit in Minnesota. I just don't know. Basketball-wise, sure. But I don't know if Cheryl Reeve is willing to budge on SDS, especially after all the drama that she's been involved in lately, the clown emojis, the complaining about the playing time in the Olympics in 2021, which Cheryl Reeve was an assistant coach on that team. And so she pays attention to all of that. I think in Atlanta, it's a bit different because I think Tanisha Wright doesn't take crap from anyone. And she is excellent at getting many different types of personalities to buy in. I mean,
I wouldn't think Cheryl takes a lot of crap from anyone either in that way, even if she is aware of it too. So there's
right.
But certainly Skylar has baggage beyond necessarily just kind of what you know about her, just in terms of the mystery around her health. She's a strong personality who has asked her way out of one situation and is at least fallen out of favor in her second. So I can see some people looking at that and saying, I don't really want a part of it. But I think circumstances being what they are in Phoenix, there's part of me that at least understands why she felt the way that it went down in Phoenix. And I would think that another team might want to centerpiece her and focus her as their star or around another star and really make a go at it in 2023 if she's able to play.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I always had, I think on when Skylar Diggins-Smith was, or when it was reported by our own Howard, I wrote a piece for Bleacher Report about potential SDS landing spots. And I thought the Fever were fascinating because Skylar has a fan base in that area. She's very familiar with South Bend. I mean, that's where she's from. But I do think you're right. I think Indiana isn't going to play around. They are, I think, one of those franchises that understand how rebuilds need to go, and they want to build
around
Aaliyah Boston.
That is a team, though, with another first-round pick at 7 that I potentially see that being the pick to start with. You're not giving up Boston for anything, but
right.
In theory, I could see that being a possibility. I just don't think it's as likely as the other two, who are maybe in a position to be quicker swingers, quicker teams to big swings right now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's
what's your draft prediction that you're going to say boldly, Jackie?
Okay, so you brought up Haley Jones before, and you were saying how, she could go 2, she could go 3. My bold prediction is that Haley Jones is going to drop out of the draft lottery, and a team that didn't expect to land her will. So could it be the New York Liberty at 6, the team that has way too many wings? Will they draft Haley Jones? It's really interesting because she's almost like a much more well-equipped version of Dee Richards, if that makes sense, in that Dee Richards hasn't really stayed healthy in the past couple of seasons, but what Haley Jones's strengths are sort of being a secondary ball handler, someone who can put pressure on the rim. That was something the Liberty were really missing in 2022, which was rim pressure, especially from the guard position. And she's a really, really good help defender, which, I mean, Dee Richards, when she's healthy, she's a very good defender as well. But the Sandy Brondello style of defense, at least from my observation, was pretty dependent on how good at help you were and how good at reading help defense you were. So, I mean, the team with way too many wings could land Haley Jones. And I mean, Haley Jones and Sabrina Ionescu are quite chummy as well. So they both have the
Bay Area kids.
Mm-hmm. They have the same trainer. But also, who knows? The Sky could also land Haley Jones. I mean, I think the Sky, we don't know and the Sky have the 5th overall pick, I believe. And
Phoenix's pick, in fact, they have that one. Yes.
Yes, they have Phoenix's pick. And so we don't know what's going on with Courtney Vandersloot. She could very much so not be on the Sky going into 2023.
I hear somebody thinks that Candace Parker is not going to be on the Sky in 2023. So
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Maybe both aren't there. There would be a need for sure.
Yes, and so obviously Dana Evans could slide into that primary spot, but how the Sky have functioned over the years is you sort of have this facilitating forward, and poof, there's Haley Jones. Could she, oh yeah?
No, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, could she drop so low to 9 that she's chosen by Seattle? I doubt that, but I also know that Seattle does need ball handlers and they do need wings.
There are certainly players there's going to be, for as little discussion as there is at number 1, you can make arguments anywhere throughout the lottery. I will make note that I've seen all of the lottery teams in Stanford at various points for big games this season. So if nothing else, they're getting their evaluations on Haley. Haley, to me, feels like a player who has a very high floor as to what she's going to, that at worst, you're going to be able to get a functional part of your rotation and somebody who's able to handle all of the things that you need from a wing player at the WNBA level. And I think she may not necessarily have the highest ceiling of players below Boston. She may not be a Olympic team level player, though I wouldn't doubt her. I've seen her play all the way back since she was in high school, and I have thought she was going to be a lottery pick. And I would find it interesting to see her drop out, especially to see who gets chosen over her. But there is definitely a little more murkiness at the 2 pick slot, which I think a lot of people would have immediately said that's where Haley goes, especially with Minnesota getting the pick. It will be fascinating to see, and part how much free agency impacts that too.
Yeah, I don't know. Easily I can see Haley Jones being drafted in the lottery, but also I feel like if she isn't picked at 2 and she isn't picked at 3, I don't think the Mystics are a great fit, just because the Mystics have a lot of post players. They have a lot of 4-3 types. But we will see. We will see. And just because you aren't in the draft lottery, you're not a lottery pick. Although, as we know, players that are picked number 1 and in the lottery, they make more money. There are a lot of players who were maybe drafted later in the first round who have made impressions in the league. Hell, there are even players who were drafted in the second round that are still around. So we will see. We will see. Now, so we move to May, and we've hit the beginning of the 2023 WNBA season. So my really bold prediction for by the time the W season comes around is I'm going to say that travel is improved. Do I want to predict exactly how? Do I think that charters will just be the norm? I'm not sure. But you have to think that now that Brittany Griner has said publicly on Instagram that it is her intention to play, something will need to be done for her protection and safety. I would say she's the most known WNBA player around the world right now because of what she had been through, the amount, people who are not even in the women's basketball space know who BG is. And so I just wonder
whether BG wants to be known or not, she is right now, undoubtedly.
Yes. And so I just wonder, will these commercial flights, will they guarantee her safety? Could there be a risk when it comes to people trying to, bother her on flights or stalk her?
We hope that nothing like that happens, but it certainly feels like if Brittany is going to play in 2023, the union, the Players Association, is going to use this to really push the league to step it up all the way. Howard reported over at Sports Illustrated that Josiah at the Liberty has offered to kind of fund the charter travel for 3 years worth of time. If an offer like that is truly available to the league and they're not doing it, they will have questions that they ask, and you certainly would like to see something happen. I think the idea that we're in the middle of the CBA is why people wouldn't assume it, but that if you think it will happen, even if we don't know how, I think that's a bold thing to see for a league to do in the middle of its CBA. But that would be why it's bold to do.
Well, that's why we're doing these bold predictions. And I think the whole idea with the issue with travel and the issue with what went on with the Liberty in 2021 was apparently owners being able to just act unilaterally that creates some sort of competitive advantage. But I think what is missed from that argument is owners and governors are allowed to invest in better facilities than some other owners and governors are willing to provide. So I feel like that's sort of a similar comparison here. And so then how does the competitive advantage narrative apply when you have a facility in Seattle, a really nice facility in Phoenix? You do not have a facility in Chicago. So I just wonder.
You should mention Vegas in the very nice facility category, because Mark Davis is making those moves. And Mark Davis, even if we don't see the charters, he's showing ways in which owners who want to can, with what Kelsey Plum revealed on a podcast recently, that he bought the middle seats in any row that his players were sitting in. So that way they wouldn't have somebody in the middle seat there. So I guess there are ways that even in this rule that's supposedly not put in place to keep a balance there and not give a competitive advantage or disadvantage to certain teams. If this is already happening, the league should just let the teams do it at this point. And to some extent, as a person, I would love to see it laid out which owners care enough to pay for the charters and which ones don't. Make it very clear who's about this life and who's not.
Yeah, and I just sort of think, well, why not take Joe Tsai up on that offer for 3 years? Because then what happens is the league is going to have a huge influx of cash come 2025, hopefully when they sign their new TV deal with whatever network that will be. So taking up the size on their idea, that allows you some time in between now and then, when hopefully charter travel will be more sustainable with the money from the new media rights deal.
Except for the whole, it's not environmentally sustainable, but we can brush that aside.
Right.
It's fine. The planet's dying anyway. So
Alex, what is your bold prediction as the WNBA season tips off in 2023?
I think we will get an expansion announcement before the first game of the season. Mainly just because if not now, then when? The WNBA is already kind of starting to run a pretty big risk here, economically speaking. There's been a lot of people doomsdaying that we're going to have a recession. But if we actually do get this recession to kick in, they may not find the amount of financial wherewithal in the media deal that they want. Now, live sports has been the one thing that media companies are still willing to pay oodles of money for, because it's the one thing that if you aren't doing it live, people don't get the same experience. You can watch movies whenever you want now. You can watch TV shows whenever you want. But live sports, the joy of it is the here and the now and the immediacy. So I would have to think that if the WNBA wants to cash in on this, they got to do it soon with the media deal. And in part, expansion helps you have an increase in inventory beyond just more games to have more people. If a team's going to come by 2025, I would think the league would want to help that team use 2 full seasons to build momentum, get the hype up, start the season ticket sales. So if you have 24 months minimum before the 2025 season tips off, I think that would be helpful. So if not by the tip-off date, then by then. And especially like right now, the other two major women's sports leagues in America have been making some pretty big and bold moves in that way. The NWSL is about to go to 14 if we believe they're as close to their expansion announcement as they are. The Professional Hockey Federation now actually has a larger salary pool than the WNBA, despite being in its infancy compared to the W. So if there's some unrest maybe on the player side with kind of the lack of growth that the WNBA is outwardly portraying and kind of perceived to not be growing in every way that actually is helping either expand the player pool or the player salary amount, then expanding the league is the way maybe to kind of show you're still growing if you're not willing to expand the roster or just give players more money.
Yeah. I mean, there was, I think, a collective disappointment across WNBA fans, across us media folks, because there's this energy about WNBA growth and about how the league is growing. And I just wonder, I really wonder why there is this trepidation here. I mean, I just think, is there sort of a trauma about how many teams folded in the league's history? And just this concept of the W constantly trying to move past the narratives of, oh, will this league survive? I guess I just wonder with the NWSL and the, PHF, they're a lot younger. And I don't think, I mean, I know with professional women's soccer, there's been a folding of leagues, but I don't.
They've had leagues fold, even if those younger leagues haven't had teams, but like both have been a little more chaotic. And that's the thing Kathy says, like, we're trying to build something sustainable. And I believe the commissioner when she says that, but the league is at least proven to this point to be rather sustainable to survive to this point. So for as much as the pandemic certainly has hurt, all of these other leagues have started to make moves as aggressively as they have been. I would hope the W realizes maybe it's time for us to be aggressive rather than conservative in that way.
Yeah, I just wonder, I really wonder Kathy Engelbert talks about all the time the fact that the business model when she arrived was not what it should have been. So we don't really know what that means. And so there's still a lot of questions. But oh my gosh, I would love to see an expansion announcement by May of 2023.
I mean, it might happen in 2022. We're recording this on the 29th. Maybe we get it as a Friday the 30th news dump for all we know.
Oh my God, the W. Yes, the W and its Friday news dumps.
Last normal day of the year, and that's when we find it. So maybe I'll be wrong because they already did it, but I doubt it personally. So
well,
first 4 months of 2023, I think is when we would get it, if I'm making a bold prediction.
I happen to agree. Speaking of the new year, New Year's resolutions are always quite tough. Some people know exactly how they want to better themselves or improve, but a lot of people don't. But here's one. Are you looking for ways to manage your budget and save some money? Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill, is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. We live in a world where there's so many subscriptions we sign up for, and it can be awfully hard to keep track. But Rocket Money helps relieve you of that issue. It will identify your subscriptions for you so you can stop paying for the ones you don't want. Rocket Money makes canceling subscriptions as easy as a click of a button. Simply find the subscriber or subscription you don't want and press cancel, and Rocket Money will cancel it for you. No more long hold times with customer service or tedious emails back and forth. Stop throwing your money away. Cancel unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/LockedOnNBA. That's rocketmoney.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, so we are now toward the middle to the end of the women's basketball or the professional women's basketball calendar. We are in June through September. We are going to have some bold predictions for the WNBA season and the playoffs. So, Alex, get us going.
All right. We are going to have a first-time MVP winner, is my prediction. Look, there's 6 active former MVPs, and they all could easily win it next year, frankly, between Candace Parker, Elena Deladon, Nneka Ogwumike, Brianna Stewart, Asia Wilson, Jonquel Jones. But, I just have a feeling that somebody's going to emerge into that level and kind of take the trophy this year. Now, I'm not paid enough to tell you who it's going to be. I'll have to talk about a bigger compensation package to actually make that prediction. But I can identify a few people who I really think could ascend to that level. I mean, Jewel Lloyd, there might be some roster shakeup in Seattle. Could she become the feature player there and really kind of become a superstar? I could see it happening. Ryan Howard could become a absolute supernova of a player. It's worth pointing out, I believe it was their second full season that both Stewie and Asia won their MVPs, their first ones. So could Ryan follow in that category? Also, what if Nafisha Collier comes back at an even better level than we saw her at and kind of becomes a world-beating center / 4-5 player in Minnesota? And I mean, if Indiana ends up with a 500 record because Aaliyah Boston is just that good, is she going to get MVP consideration? There's options, and then there's one that I think is maybe even the biggest mystery of them all. But Brittany Griner was second in the MVP vote in 2021. What if she's just that good again in 2023? I mean, I don't know if anybody wants to expect anything there, but on narrative alone, if she's anywhere close to as good as she was before everything happened in 2022, I think she'd run away with the MVP in 2023, especially if she turns this otherwise intriguing mess in Phoenix into a competent team. So, yeah, I think we're going to get a first-time MVP this year.
I don't know. Could Sabrina Ionescu be in the mix? I'm trying to think of some others. Maybe, who else? I don't know. Brianna Jones. I don't know. Could Brianna Jones go to a team where she is the primary option in the post? I don't know. But I love that. I love a first-time MVP. I think Asia got her first. She was MVP in 2020, right? So I think that was her third season. So 2018.
Okay. So
yes.
Perhaps I was a little early in that regard, but even still, that could be the moment in that way. So I think we're going to have a new MVP winner this year is the key takeaway. Even if those other players are still world-beating superstars like they all are. What is your bold regular season prediction then, Jackie?
Well, so as you all know, on this podcast, I have been following this storyline about front offices in the WNBA and how they have expanded and how we're in this moment where we believe there will only be one situation in the league where you have a head coach and a general manager that are both the same person. And so I happen to believe that a first-time GM is going to win Executive of the Year. Does that mean Darius Taylor with the Connecticut Sun wins? Does that mean that the Dan Padover GMing tree is really very strong? Does it mean that the Sparks, whoever is going to be the GM in LA, does that person, whoever LA hires, do they take what was an absolute disaster in 2022 and make the Sparks into a team that is well constructed, which is something they haven't had in a very long time? You also have Claire DeWellius, who will be a first-time general manager. I think during the Cheryl Reeves show, Cheryl Reeves podcast, she expressed that her role as president of operations is that she will be looking at things from more of a macro lens. And I believe Claire DeWellius is going to be the one who's going to be really dealing with the details and the complications involved in the
She'll be the one making the phone calls, even if she's not making the decisions, perhaps, or not solely making the decisions. Also, by the way, Jackie, I think you're forgetting one new GM. I heard this guy Mike Tebow is about to start as a GM for the Washington Mystics. I have seen him in other roles around the W, but the GM one is new for him. I am sure that Mike is going to have a learning curve that is quite steep as he ascends to the general manager role. Surely that's a guy who, well, hey, look, I mean, he could win Executive of the Year and we could claim it's a first-time GM, right?
First time only being the GM. As well.
Details.
Okay.
Who quibbles about the details?
Right.
But I happen to really like this. All three of those teams, and if you even can throw Washington in as four, it feels like an offseason that's an open book, and somebody is going to have to make some big swings. And I think a lot of these teams that made these moves at the general manager position kind of did it knowing that there's going to need to be some revamping. LA is going to have to look very different than they did last year. Connecticut, we kind of suspect, is going to make some pretty big changes and look very different. Minnesota obviously has Sylvia Fowles retiring. So how do you either replace her or adjust the team to not have her? So I think even those three alone, let alone my joke with Washington, you have, I mean, there's only 12 execs in the league. So you're casting not a full net there, but I think that's a pretty good net, if nothing else. And I think it's pretty bold. There's some really good execs, but if a new guy or gal comes in and makes some pretty remarkable moves, that could be there. So I like it.
I just wonder with Claire DeWellius, we don't really know who is in charge of the nominating. Like, is it this idea that Cheryl is still technically an executive because she's the president? Like, I don't know. I don't know how that works.
Baseball's dealt with this for a while. There's a lot of baseball people where like the decision maker is now like president of baseball operations, but they have somebody who's a titled GM. And it's usually the titled GM who does all the interviews. Cheryl will have to do plenty of interviews anyway because she's coaching. So we'll see. That is a league voted award, so they might vote based off who they talk to the most. And if they talk to Claire most, then that could be it. But I like the prediction, Jackie, is what I'm saying. It's fun. It's very bold.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it's in line with following the story about how front offices have been growing in the league. And it's a good thing. It's a really good thing.
I would wonder, do you think, like, do you have a different bold prediction that like maybe would help make your exec of the year one come true as we kind of predict the rest of this way?
You mean who I think might win the WNBA championship? Is that what
Well, if we're going to wrap up a bold predictions podcast, we should probably at least predict a champion.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Free agent moves haven't happened. Nothing's happened yet, but let's pick one anyway. So.
Okay. My WNBA champion is going to be the Connecticut Sun. They are going to win the championship, but their path to getting there won't be at all like it was under Curt Miller, meaning those seasons where they were like the top seeds and the best team throughout the season. I don't think it's going to happen that way. I think the Sun are going to underachieve during the regular season after trading MVP Jonquel Jones. I happen to agree, or I'm very much so in agreement with that bold prediction from Alex. I'm not saying where. But Stephanie White's system and her culture, I think, will take a little bit of time to form in Uncasville. But I think something will click when their new high volume shot creating guard, Skylar Diggins-Smith, will go on a tear after she returns from maternity leave, potentially. And the Sun will pull a Chicago Sky, and they will defeat the New York Liberty, who defeated the Aces in 5 games in the semis. Mic drop.
So that there's like 3 different bold predictions wrapped into this one here. Skylar Diggins-Smith in Connecticut winning a title, though, is fascinating. Chicago pulling a Chicago Sky. The Liberty in the finals is fascinating if they beat the Aces. It's funny you mentioned the Liberty, though. I have the Liberty also in the finals in my extremely early bold prediction. That is, by the way, I am going to say it, and I'm going to imagine you're going to head nod, but that is the Breanna Stewart-led New York Liberty, which I'll be the one that says it feels not bold enough to be considered a bold prediction for us. To me, it feels almost like a foregone conclusion, though I guess we'll have to just see what happens. But Stewie with the Liberty going to the finals. But Jackie, can I ask you, do you know the last time a team went back-to-back in the WNBA?
I want to say it's been 20 years.
It's been since the Sparks did it in 2001 and 2002. So literally 20 years ago since the last time we've had a repeat winner in the W. That for as much as it feels like this isn't very bold, that 20-year gap tells me it would be bold to say the Aces are the team that ends that run of different champions year after year after year, and they go back to back. I mean, they might be the best team in all of American professional basketball right now, period. I suspect their roster is going to change just a little bit on the back end and kind of with their bench, and it'll look even better after this offseason.
I mean, as you know, I was very critical of their GMing during the offseason. It was also in part because they did not really have a GM. They had a GMing committee. And so,
well, the committee didn't do terribly, and they got their entire core back, re-signed on extensions for the most part for 2 years. Mm-hmm. This core that is here, that starting quintet, they're built to win now and to win big. And they've already won once. They won in 2022. I think they nail this second chance. They really have 3 set up after winning in 2022, with all of them but Asia signed through 2024. And I suspect Asia after this year would return on a 1-year deal to kind of pair everybody to 2024. So if you've got really 3 chances at it, they've already nailed the first chance. They've got 2 more. I actually think they're going to nail the second chance too. And they beat the Stewie-led New York Liberty to go back-to-back.
Yes, the Stewie-led New York Liberty that has a lead guard with not a lot of WNBA playoff experience in Sabrina Ionescu. Oh, man. Fascinating stuff.
Has she played in any big games in her career before the WNBA? I don't know, Jackie. You tell me.
Oh, yeah. Well, that one against Stanford, right?
She's played in. She has been she was in the Elite Eight as a freshman and the Final Four every year except the COVID year. So I trust that Stewie and Sabrina could be a finals worthy duo for the Liberty, but I don't think they're good enough to beat the Aces.
Well, the Aces will have to get better, which you think they will. But thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And join us tomorrow when Hunter Cruz, Em Adler, and Joshua Welch will be back with our Saturday WNBA Draft-themed show. Now make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Peter Burkowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Well, that is our show of very bold predictions. Alex, thank you for joining me and for providing some very, very spicy and hot takes. And a happy and healthy new year to all of you, our listeners.